All right, Captain America Civil War. Now, this was a movie when it came out that I was like looking at the lineup and looking at the trailer and everything. And was like, why isn't this an Avengers movie? But overall, the way that this is balanced, and I think that this is, when you watch this, you know why the Russo brothers were hired to take on Infinity War and Endgame. Like, everything in this is so well balanced for how many characters are in this movie and all of what's going on and how much it plays into everything that's led up to this movie. It's a no-brainer that these are the guys that need to handle your next Avengers movie. Now that Joss Whedon is out and you need new guys, they did Winter Soldier, which is one of the greatest fucking comic book action movies ever made. And then they follow it up with Civil War, which blends all of these things so perfectly. The action sequences in this are actually even more impressive in the sense that, like, I don't know, I feel like there's growth here because a lot of the Winter Soldier's action sequences were really fast, quick cuts. Now, it's still a great fucking action movie, 100%. But a lot of the action sequences in this are actually longer takes. They're like 3 to 5 seconds as opposed to 1 second frantic cuts. There's a lot of like long takes that go on in the fight sequences, which just, I don't know, it shows more growth as directors, and I appreciate that. I personally like as long as a take can go. That's, my preference. I know that's really, really hard, so it's not done a ton, but you can see a growth here, and I'm going to be looking for it in Infinity War as well when I watch it here. Just kind of trying to see the progression here from the directors. So we've got Bucky here being pulled for a mission out of deep freeze. This reminds me very much of Universal Soldier, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Dolph Lundgren, one of my fave action movies in the 90s. And then we know that's going to come back up later, and we'll get to that later. Obviously, hopefully you've seen these movies. Spoilers, obviously. But that has huge weight and impact later in the movie. Crossbones, here we go. Brock Rumlow, freaking Frank Grillo coming back. He infiltrates the Center for Disease Control, which is fucked up, man. Releasing a biological weapon. Oh, what a horrible thing to do. And we got Wanda here. She's joined the crew full on Avengers now. And they have this great fight sequences. I mean, so much is going on. It's hard to even talk about. It's just too action-packed to even consider what my favorite this and that is. It's all badass. All the action in this sequence, Captain America's fight sequences, Black Widows, all that stuff. Where like Scarlet Witch actually takes Cap and throws him up as he jumps and all. I love the team up stuff. Anytime where it's not just one of them fighting, it's them working together, and like, Cap using his shield with Thor, or Wanda throwing him up, or any of that stuff. Anytime you have a team up moment in these movies, I love it. And there's a lot of it in this movie, and that was one of them that I really appreciated. We find out that Brock was burned really badly at the end of Winter Soldier, which makes sense. A building was dropped on him. He should be dead, but I guess he survived. And so he suicide bombs Captain America. He's like, fuck it, I hate you. This is who I wanted revenge on anyways. Even though it was Falcon that did it to him, whatever. I guess they're together. Even Falcon says in this movie, people who shoot at you end up shooting at me. So I guess the sins of your buddy there kind of come back on you. But he goes to suicide bomb himself, and Wanda comes in. This is a really fucked up sequence because Wanda uses her abilities to contain the blast, but the blast isn't contained in the sense that the fire isn't still burning. So freaking Crossbones, whatever you want to call him here, Brock, has to sit there and just burn it in front of them as all the fire has consumed around him, and he's burning in this shell. Horrible. And then she lifts it up to try to get it out of there, and before she can, I mean, it takes a lot of effort, I'm sure, it blows up and kills some people on top of the building, which of course is like the final straw after the Hulkbuster sequence and this Sokovia drop and all that stuff. Everyone's already kind of had it. And now there's like a terrorist attack essentially, and Wakandans are killed, which they have some shit to say about this, obviously. But this really isn't her fault. I mean, she really did try her best and saved everyone on the ground. I feel like everyone around there was probably like, well, thank you. I mean, it sucks they had to die, but I am appreciative of what you did. So yeah, she saves Cap. She saves everyone around that little town square there. And yes, it sucks that she couldn't get him further up before it exploded, but I mean, it's not her fault in the slightest. And I think she finally realizes that in this, because there's a lot of that talk in here. This movie's pretty deep. Where this movie goes, essentially, is what would happen if you brought superheroes into the world as we know it. Like, to an extent, of course. I mean, you still have to, suspend some disbelief. These are superheroes. But for the most part, this is probably the most realistic, grounded reaction to superheroes in any Marvel movie that I've seen. I know that DC movies try to take a more serious tone with their movies, and this movie does balance humor with seriousness, but it's more on the serious side of things. And the reactions of how people are like, these guys can't go around unchecked anymore. If gods showed up tomorrow, these super villains and superheroes. One thing that I really love about Age of Ultron that I forgot to mention, it was one of my favorite moments in the fucking movie, and I completely forgot about it, but it does play into this here as well. So I guess it may be, you can work either way where we're going to put it. But the whole idea, and this is something I've talked about with superheroes, is it does seem like, because superheroes are created, it's kind of like sports, athletes. If you look back once upon a time, what athletes were able to do. They were only able to jump so high. They were only able to, whatever. Their accomplishments were very meager compared to now. And so as competition gets better and as more records are broken, it makes people perform better. And that's true in a lot of areas, but it's true in sports more than anything for me. Like, I was a big Phoenix Suns fan back in the day, and I'm telling you, man, they would play to the level of their opponents. That was their problem. They should be able to smoke this team because of how good they were at some points, but they would play at this level, and then these amazing fucking teams, they'd come in and they play them at that level, and it was like, can't you just fucking play them? And so, like, what Vision is saying here is, with superheroes comes supervillains. There's a causality. There's fucking ramifications of you have superheroes. Now there has to be an upping of the game in the villain department, and that they all, offset one another. And they all create one another. And I love that. I love that because it makes so much sense. It's like, oh, well, what if these supervillains came in and there was no superheroes to stop them? And what if there was these superheroes and there was no supervillains to fight? Then their powers wouldn't really work all that well. So the fact that they all kind of create one another does make a lot of sense. And all right, let's focus. So Tony is dealing with his past traumas, and we get the de-aging of Tony, Robert Downey Jr. here, and I'm a big fucking Back to School fan with Rodney Dangerfield, and Robert Downey Jr. is in that. It was one of his first movies. Great fucking movie. Love him in it. And you were taking him back to almost an age like at that time. And man, knowing him from that and knowing him here, I remember people on the internet being like, oh, that looked like shit. What? Bullshit. It looked amazing. That looked like young Robert Downey Jr. was sitting right there on the fucking screen in the late, 2010s. It was insane. It was like, what the fuck is happening right now? I'm looking at young Robert Downey Jr. Nuts. So he's dealing with the past traumas of his parents and how they left, and he's saying this isn't how it's happened. And $611 million, I think is what the number was, a project to get people over their grief or whatever is ailing them mentally. Because of course he created this to deal with probably his PTSD and his problems with his parents in the past. Even though that does kind of go back to the line in Iron Man 3 when he's like, "Dads leave," and you don't got to be a pussy about it. It's like, well, building a $611 million machine to get over what daddy did to you sounds like you're being a pussy, Tony. I don't blame you. I'm not saying you are, because I don't agree with you. It does suck that happens, but it is kind of hypocritical. Tony is blamed for the death of this woman's kid from the Segovia fallout, which it's like, dude, come on. Ultron went up there, which Tony created, so that's probably why he takes this so bad. And the way this movie plays out, and this is where the arcs come in, and why this is so interesting, is because Cap is so by the book, and Tony is such a renegade, that the fact that Tony is the one that wants to put a leash on them, that wants to, register, and Cap isn't, the Mr. by the book, Mr. Rules, it's just trippy. It's like, whoa, this is exactly the opposite of how you would think this would go. But he's got such an allegiance to Bucky that he can't let this go. And I understand where he's coming from. And Tony eventually, ultimately, and all of them do realize that Cap was right. And I have to say, upon my rewatch of everything, Cap has really won me over as my favorite Avenger. I didn't think that before this watch through, but there's just something about him. It's just, I feel like Cap is that guy that every dude wishes he was. That's like the best version of you that there is. He's so honorable, and he's so fucking cool, and I don't know. He's just like this perfect person, and even Tony is like, oh, sometimes I just want to punch you in your perfect teeth. It's like everything is, and even freaking Zemo has to point out here that he has, he's like, oh, I see a little speckle of green in your blue eye. Like, it's good to finally find a flaw in you. Like, you don't have a single flaw, and I have to agree with him. And then, yeah, we kind of are talking about the real world consequences. We got Ross from the Incredible Hulk movie finally coming back. William Hurt's character. It's good to see him back after so many movies have passed and no mention of anything from the Incredible Hulk movie, actor-wise, character-wise, outside of the Hulk, obviously. And Daniel Bruhl. Now, Daniel Bruhl is an actor I really do like from Inglourious Basterds and the movie Rush, which also stars Chris Hemsworth, Thor. Awesome movie directed by Ron Howard. I mentioned it previously in another review. I don't remember which one, but Daniel Bruhl, really great actor. And Zemo is a character I think that I know a lot of people didn't like him, but I actually really like what he does. Do I agree with it? No, but I do like where his head is and how he plays them against each other. It's kind of what Loki was going for in the first Avengers movie, where he was kind of pit them against each other and bring on the Hulk and all that. But this is a much more intelligent way. Granted, a lot of things had to go a certain way for this all to work, and how you could, account for those variables is pretty much impossible. But I think he was just a desperate man, and things just kind of all went right and fell into place for him for this all to happen. But ultimately, he does lose out. And he even suggests at the end, like, did I fail? And knowing what happens in Infinity War and all this and how they do all band together, yes, you did fail, sir. You did fail. And another thing here is that a lot of this comes from and how Zemo's character comes into play here is because of the moment at the end of Winter Soldier where Black Widow releases all of the information of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Hydra onto the internet for anyone to look at, and he's able to break the encryptions and find everything out and able to use this to his advantage to get back at them for killing his family in Sokovia. So he takes this stuff, and we'll get there. Hold on. And we find out that this is 8 years since Iron Man, so an actual timeline is given here. It says it in the movie. And they have, of course, their opposition. They're arguing about what they need to do. And I already mentioned the opposites of what they would be. Agent 13 being related to Peggy. That makes it kind of awkward because here Cap is in love with Peggy, and then he is now dating or kissing. Eventually, he wants to be romantic with her great niece. That's gotta be a mind trip for him. He's gotta feel like a fucking pedophile. I'm like 100 years old, and I'm making out with my dead ex nobody. I guess it wasn't really his girlfriend, but a potential girlfriend's great niece. Weird, right? I don't blame him. I'd still fuck her for sure, but I don't really have any morals. And so we got the Black Panther introduced here, and of course Spider-Man as well, which they gave away in the trailer, which sucked. How much better would it have been if Spider-Man showed up in the airport sequence, not knowing he was coming at all? How fucking bad. Of course, they had to do the Tony recruiting the moment. I guess the recruiting saying could have been cool enough. But the trailer was a lame way to put him in the movie. That was just, this is Sony all over the place. Sony having to push the character and all this shit. Ugh, don't get me started on that. The Far From Home being announced before is so dumb. It's so dumb. I was just having a big long conversation about that. Like right before Endgame comes out, you're going to have a movie that confirms that he obviously comes. It's such dumb marketing. How much cooler would it have been if at the end of Avengers, during the cut sequences, it's like Spider-Man will return in June, surprise, and then boom, it's like on the slate a couple months later. Everyone would have freaked out. The internet would have blown up. It would have been its own publicity fucking stunt. It would have worked beautifully. The fact they didn't do that, that's all Sony bullshit, you can tell. And yeah, so Black Panther's dad's killed, Bucky's pinned for it, and Black Panther goes out to take down Bucks. Yeah. Oh man, so Cap tracks down Bucky, and then they have this huge fight sequence in a stairwell. So badass, this whole fight sequence, and then the Black Panther chase down the freaking little highway there. That's in the tunnel, and they're running as fast as the cars, and Cap's jumping on cars, and they're jumping across, and Bucky grabs that motorcycle, one arm swings around, jumps on it, and takes off. It's so fucking cool. It's so fucking cool, man. It's weird. It's the running really fast. It looks kind of silly, but it also looks really awesome at the same time. It's hard to explain. But I was like, that kind of looks silly, but it kind of doesn't. Oh no, Vision says it in here. Vision says superheroes bring on supervillains. Oh, okay, good. I thought it was in Ultron. Oh, okay. I was wondering why I missed it in my notes. No, never mind. Cool. All right. We find out that the Mind Stone that created Vision is what created Wanda. So they're kind of connected in a way. So the fact that they have a romance later because they both were kind of brought to be superheroes through the same stone that he currently possesses in order to sustain life. I don't know. When I found I didn't realize that she got her powers from his Mind Stone. And when I did in this, I was like, now that's cool, man. I dig that. I dig that makes the romance more there. And I like the romance between them. They're both oddballs. They're both weird. That's what they even refer to her as in Age of Ultron. He's fast and she's weird. We got Martin Freeman. We got Bilbo Baggins himself in here. You guys know I'm a huge Hobbit fan. Fucking blast me all you want. I don't give a shit. The Hobbit trilogy is amazing. Martin Freeman is one of the biggest reasons that works so well, and it's badass to see him in here. And we got Pepper and Tony on a break, which kind of sucks. I really wish they wouldn't have done that in here, but because it really isn't all that addressed. I'll look for it in the other films, but I don't think there is any addressing that much else outside of this. So it's just putting them on a break. I don't know. So you can hit on Aunt May. I don't know. It's weird. And so Zemo sets it all up to be able to get to Bucky, to turn everyone against each other. He uses all these words to activate him so that he can find out where all these other Winter Soldiers are so that he can go kill them. That was a shocking moment for me, that when they get there, they think they're going to have this big fight with all these other Winter Soldiers. I think that's probably a letdown for some people, but this is about the Civil War. And so I was okay with it when he got there and they're all been shot to death in their sleep. It makes him cool. It makes him awesome that he pitted all these Avengers against themselves. And then he had the ability to take on all these soldiers and unleash hell. And what did he do? He was there to thwart the attack. And he saw the Avengers. Zemo's character, if you're really paying attention to the movie, isn't a bad guy. Like, he is and he isn't. Yes, he killed innocent people, so he's a bad guy. Don't get me wrong. But his intentions, where he's coming from, he sees them as the villain. And usually that's what's the most compelling thing about villains in movies, is the villain sees themselves as the good guy. And he really does see himself here. And by the way I see it in his head and the circumstances that led him to these actions, I can kind of see where he's coming from. Now, the bombing of the Senate there when T'Challa's dad gets killed and all that stuff, yes, not cool. You don't kill innocent people. But I do kind of get where he's coming from. And then Cap goes out and we get the cool moment where I'm going to sound like I'm gay, but I don't really give a shit, where Cap grabs the fucking helicopter. I remember this in the trailer and just being like, dude, this guy's so cool. He's so buff, and he grabs the thing and he's just pulling, he's flexing his muscles. It's just like testosterone. It makes you want to go to the gym instantly and just call yourself a pussy and just lift weights as hard as you can. It's such a great scene though. And then he returns the favor by pulling Bucky out of the water here, because Bucky crashes and falls into the water, and Cap jumps in and returns the favor. And then Spider-Man being a young kid. This is so important. Obviously we had Tobey Maguire and we had Andrew Garfield, which I really like both of them. And I'm a big fan of all Spider-Man movies. I've never disliked a Spider-Man movie. I know a lot of people hate on Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2. I like them both, okay? In fact, I love Spider-Man 3. So I don't care. I love the emo dance stuff. I think it's hilarious. I think it's so fitting in the movie. I think a lot of people seem to miss out on Raimi. Like, I grew up with Raimi doing Evil Dead and all these other movies. Like, that's so Raimi. That's so dark, man. That's so Raimi. And I don't know. It's funny. It's good stuff. But seeing Tom Holland here, I love it. I love it, man. I love him being like this 15-year-old kid from Queens. It's Spider-Man. I mean, I wore my Spider-Man shirt for this review and the other reviews because of it. It's just, this is perfect. And my God, Marissa Tomei is still one of the most beautiful women on planet Earth. I've always said that I think she's the most beautiful woman that's ever lived, and she is just aging like a fine wine. I made a joke recently on my Facebook saying that I would get into a committed relationship with her right now, and I would be terrified that she would leave me because I was starting to look too old. She is just, she is so wonderful. And anyone who's complaining about Aunt May being too young and too hot, it's like, Aunt May is an aunt to a 15-year-old boy. How old do you expect her to be? It's his parents' sister. Like, she shouldn't really be older than 40 or 50. Aunt May in this is 50, like 2 years old. For a 15-year-old, That's pretty adequate. So she's the right age, and yes, she's hot as hell, but that shouldn't take away from her. I like that Tony has to keep bringing up that fact, like you're abnormally hot aunt or whatever he says. I think that's pretty funny stuff. My God, this review is already 25 minutes long. Jesus Christ, we got a lot left. All right, moving along. Hawkeye breaks Wanda out. She puts down Vision, like throws him down into hell. Jesus, she puts him so far down. We got Agent 13 and Cap's kiss here, and freaking Falcon and Bucky sitting in the backseat eyeing him. Like, Bucky was like, oh, that should have been me. There's a lot of talk about them being gay for one another. I don't get that at all. I just think they're great friends. And then, yeah, under ruse, Cap, freaking shield taken by Spider-Man here, and then you have the airport fight sequence. It's awesome. I mean, I'm not going to spend too much time talking about it. I've already spent way too much time talking about that stuff. The only problem with this sequence is that no one can die. It's the only issue. They do try to throw some kind of moment in with War Machine here, Rhodey, and he does end up getting paralyzed. I'll see where that plays in. I can't really remember right now on how, maybe, I guess because the War Machine suit can make him not. So he's got the perfect suit to help him be able to not be paralyzed as much. I don't know. I forget where that all goes in the future. But yeah, he does become paralyzed to some extent. But I'm sure Tony probably just creates some fucking tech that makes him be able to walk like nothing ever happened. Ant-Man goes big. That's a great sequence and plays into what happens in Ant-Man and the Wasp. I don't know how much time has passed, and I don't know, shouldn't he be on house arrest by this point? I think it's brought up in Ant-Man and the Wasp, and if so, he's sitting in a prison that Cap has to come break him out of, so how he wasn't noticed to be gone, I don't know. I'm going to be looking for it in Wasp. Maybe I remember that wrong. But Black Widow finally comes in and helps Cap after everything goes down, shoots Black Panther, and keeps him away so that they can get away. So she does end up taking the side of her friend, which makes sense because, freaking Hawkeye is on that side, and they're best friends. And so she's kind of going against her two besties there with Cap and Hawk, but she ultimately comes, I say ultimately a lot lately. I don't know why. Maybe because this is Ultimates. All right, whatever. And then, blah, blah, blah. I talked about all that shit. Tony finds out that Bucky was innocent, yet also does Black Panther as well. So everyone realizes that, and he tries to pull it. He's going to be done with it. And we find out that Bucky killed Tony's mother and father, which, even though he was brainwashed, Tony can't let it go. And of course, the big fight has to happen. And Cap, I guess, knew all along that somebody killed Tony's parents, but he wasn't 100% that it was Bucky. Bucky gets his arm ripped off here by yet again, so he loses his arm where his arm was already lost. And we already talked about all Zemo's family and all that stuff. He pits them against each other because he knows he can't kill them because better men than him have tried, which makes the most sense. I mean, Ultron took him on with all these things and lifted up a fucking, an Earth killer and couldn't beat him. And here's this guy who has nothing. He's just like a little hacker or whatever the hell he was. And he's like, how the hell do I do it? And it's like, well, these are the strongest guys on Earth. Let me just have them kill each other. Great thing right there. I love that. And I feel like they should be thanking him for killing all those Winter Soldiers because we already saw how well they handled Bucky before when they were training. So these guys were no joke. Cap defeats Iron Man. I mean, in the end, he breaks his chest thing and leaves them behind, and he even, Tony yells out like, my dad made that shield, that's not yours, and he leaves it behind. I'm done, fine, fuck it, you can have it. We got the FedEx worker here is Stan Lee's cameo, who calls him Tony Stank. And then Cap breaks all the guys out of jail. Bucky is put back into deep freeze on Wakanda, setting up the events of what takes place here in Black Panther and in Spider-Man. So yeah, that's that. And I look forward to whatever's next. I can't remember what is next, but I'm having such a blast doing this. I hope somebody's watching these fucking things. I know there's some people, and thank you, because I know these are not what my channel's for. A lot of people are only here for horror, so I'm probably only getting like 50 to 100 views on these things, which sucks because I am putting so much time and so much effort into these. But it is what it is. I get it. It's a horror channel. You know, what can I say about it? But I'm enjoying doing it. I'm going to go watch some Ash vs. Evil Dead. Adios.